Hi, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with a review of the Philips SHP9500 headphone. And I realize I did do a full review of this a while back, and I also did a review of this headphone comparing it to the Grotto SR80E. But the reason for this video is this headphone has been modified. The modification was done by Wild Lee from Venture Electronics, and he sent me this headphone about a week ago to give it a listen. And I will give you a look at both the original version of this headphone and the modified version and show you the difference. This here is the original SHP9500, and as you can see, there is on the bottom you have one headphone connection here, and that would be on the left ear cup. There is none on the right. So it's a standard 3.5 millimeter, but that means that there has to be a cable going from the left ear cup to the right. And actually, I don't know where it's at. I don't know how they fit it through the headband. But anyway, this limits your cable choices to a single cable. Obviously a stereo cable, but with only one connection, you cannot use this with a balanced output from a balanced amp. So what has been done, the headphone basically, everything else about it looks exactly the same. There's no differences on the external changes to the headphone. But what you can see now, the difference is now there's a 3.5 millimeter jack on each side, on each ear cup. And as you can see, the work is very nice. It looks like it came from the factory that way. And then also, what it came with this headphone is a very nice, high quality braided cable. And you have your two 3.5 millimeter connections at your headphone end. And then the other end of this cable has a 4.4 millimeter balanced Pentagon connection. So this headphone can now be used from the balanced output of your amp. There's a lot I like about this headphone, and that's why I wanted to do this. I did talk to Wild Lee about this, and I really do like the SHP9500. In fact, 2 years in a row I put it on my best headphone of the year list for its price. This headphone normally sells for about $80. You can sometimes find them as low as $70, and at that price I think this is the best option in an entry-level audiophile grade headphone. It's not a bass head headphone, but it's very neutral, it's very accurate, and my recommendation for someone getting into headphones that wants an audiophile sound, if they're on a budget, the SHP9500 is a headphone I recommend. The things I like about it is the tone balance is very neutral. No real emphasis in the bass or treble, just well balanced and neutral headphone. It has good bass and treble extension. The bass actually goes pretty low. It does actually produce some pretty decent sub bass, and the treble doesn't roll off on it. It has very good detail and resolution, and it has a pretty large soundstage with decent width and even decent depth to it, and the imaging is good on this headphone. I'm talking about, for a headphone in this price range. Obviously it's not going to compete with, $1,000 headphone or whatever, but it is a very nice sounding headphone for the price. It's also lightweight, it's comfortable, it's efficient, it's easy to drive. The only weak point that I really see is just the one-sided cable, because I happen to have a lot of cables laying around, a lot with 3.5 millimeter connections and different connectors at the amp end, and I was limited what I could use with this headphone, and obviously couldn't use it with a balanced amp, because you can't use a balanced amp. The balanced output of an amp in a headphone that combines the grounds on the two channels, because you will damage your amp. So that means you just can't use it. I did want to talk for a minute. I did first want to mention what Wild Lee said they actually did to this headphone, and that was, including the second plug, and I guess they did do some internal wiring changes. They upgraded the wiring inside the headphone at the same time. And I did want to take a minute to discuss my feelings on balanced amps versus single-ended amps, because that would be the reason for buying this modified headphone. And I did want to mention that they haven't set a price yet on this modified version. Like I said, the normal version goes about $80. They said they're still working on coming up with a price. Basically, it's going to be, cover their cost of adding the cable and doing the work. So anyway, I did want to talk about balanced amps for a minute. In my opinion, there is no real advantage to a balanced headphone amp over a single-ended headphone amp. That being said, I do feel that if an amp has been designed as balanced, then it is almost always going to sound better from its balanced input if it has both. And every balanced amp I know of has both a balanced output and a single-ended output. So if the amp was designed as balanced, it's almost always going to sound better from the balanced output. Okay, then we have the cable. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I put a balanced cable on my headphone and it sounded a lot better. Okay, the question is, was it the cable that made the headphone sound better, or was it the amp that, using the balanced output of the amp, that made it sound better? And I do believe that analog cables can make small differences in the sound. So I'm not going to say that the cable makes no difference, because, I think an analog cable can make small differences, but I have heard significant differences using the balanced output of amps, and I believe most of that difference is coming from the balanced output of the amp. Like I said, if it was designed as a balanced amp, it's almost always going to sound better from its balanced output. So, in my opinion, the improvement that you gain using the balanced output, that 90% of that improvement is coming from the amp, and maybe 10% of that improvement is coming from the cable. So anyway, the question comes down to, was there an improvement in the sound of this headphone? Because I did compare the original version and I did compare that to the modified version. And what I did to compare these is, right now I happen to have an iFi Zen deck with a built-in headphone amp, and I have the iFi Zen can, which looks pretty much the same, and you can actually see the two of them sitting back here. This would be the Zen deck, this is the Zen can. They both have a single-ended output, and they both have a balanced output, which is 4.4 millimeter Pentagon. Anyway, the amp is probably better in the Zen can because it doesn't include a deck. It's just an amp. It is definitely more powerful, but so far as the sound, I think they sound pretty much the same. So what I did is use these two amps that sound very, very similar, and used one of these headphones on one amp and the other on the other amp. And to make sure it wasn't the amp creating the difference in the sound, I switched back and forth a couple times. So anyway, the question is, did it sound better? And I would say without a doubt, this modified headphone does sound better from the balanced output of the amp. What was better about it, the first thing I noticed is that female vocals sounded more forward. Instead of sounding like they were coming from behind the music, they sounded like they were out front, in front of the music. So they were more prominent, and the vocals sounded cleaner and contained more texture and more micro details. So I definitely heard a difference in especially female vocals. Male vocals also, but not to the extent of the female vocals. And then the other thing I heard was a larger, wider soundstage with more depth and more of a three-dimensional effect, a more layering to the soundstage. So that's the difference I heard with the modified headphone. But once again, did the difference become from the amp or from the cable? And I would say I've already reviewed the Zendac, or the Zendac with the built-in amp, and without a doubt I feel that that amp sounds better from its balanced output. So I'm going to say that most of the difference is coming from the balanced output of the amp. So does that make this modification worth it? In my opinion, yes. If you already have a balanced amp, then you can get the most out of your amp by using a balanced headphone. And if this is the headphone that is in your budget maybe, or this is a headphone that you have, by modifying it to balance, now you can use a balanced output of your amp and get all out of your amp that it has. You know, you're taking advantage of the balanced circuitry and the better sound. If you don't already have a balanced amp, if you already have a good amp that isn't balanced, I don't think that's a problem. I don't think you're going to really gain anything by going to a balanced amp unless you just want a different amp, or maybe from a different company. So as far as if you don't have a balanced amp, is it worth it to get the balanced headphone then go out and buy a balanced amp? Probably not. But if you already have a balanced amp and you know that that amp sounds better from the balanced output, then yeah, I would say this is probably something you want to check out. So yeah, I can definitely recommend this. I think it's a good idea, and I think this is something that probably will sell. So my advice to Wild Lee from Venture Electronics is I think you have a good idea here and you should pursue this. So anyway, that's about all I have tonight. I'm going to wrap this up. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you are all welcome to join us at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. We're up to about 9,700 members now. So hope to see you there, and once again, thanks for watching my video.